highly secure, top secret Spurs Insider Podcast headquarters. This is the Spurs Insider Podcast with your host, Mike Finger. We are joined by sports editor Nick Talbot and Spurs beat writer Jeff McDonald with his Polar Pop. We do not have Tom Ringo Starr Osborne with us this week. He is recuperating at home from a minor illness. Our thoughts are with him.
Could you imagine going to a Beatles show, like paying the $1.50 or whatever it cost back in the day, and then Ringo's out with a minor illness?
It would not be good.
And they don't. Yeah.
So,
how would George and the other two guys? What are their names? John and Steve. How would they keep the How would they keep the rhythm?
Steve. That's why Steve always gave total props to Ringo, because he kept the rhythm. And this is going to be a tough podcast for a couple of reasons here in the headquarters.
One is our producer just flubbed everything.
This is true. If this sounds inorganic, this discussion we're about to have, it's because we've already had it for about 5 minutes before realizing that we were not recording. So again, if Ringo was here, this would not have happened, because he keeps the rhythm and he keeps his eye on all of the technical stuff. And so we paid for that. And now we're going to have a conversation about where the Spurs are and all those outrageous things that you just said earlier. You're going to have to repeat them.
The cuss words too? Or?
The cuss words too.
I don't know. I don't think so.
So anyway, what we talked about into a void of nothingness earlier that we will get into again is...
It was sort of like audio Twitter.
Exactly. It's like the guys who have one follower that are yelling into just nothingness and tweet all day, and you wonder who is listening to it. The answer is nobody. But we appreciate the listeners of the Spurs Insider Podcast for always tuning in and subscribing to the Spurs Nation newsletter and subscribing to our podcast on all the podcast apps. We are recording this heading into the Spurs Thursday game against the Brooklyn Nets. So since the last time we talked to you for the Spurs Insider Podcast, there have been a couple of big things. Jeff was, in when we were screaming into the void earlier, making a big deal about the Spurs' first victory outside the United States in a while. Is that correct?
It's the first one ever in Mexico.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Why are we talking? Why are you trying to make a big deal out of the Rockets thing?
He was trying to be more positive, which everybody knows that's Jeff McDonald's brand, is to always be more positive. While I was talking about the fact that the Spurs blew a 25-point lead against the Rockets a few nights ago in a game that had a lot of little side stories, including some substitutions that were new and different. But in terms of the blown 25-point lead itself, Nick, you were saying like it kind of was expected to happen, right?
Yeah, and once it got down to 11, I was like, oh no, this isn't going to turn out very well. Then got down to 9, 7, and I was like, oh, well, I don't want to be Tom right now, because he's going to have to rewrite this entire story that he's up. Exactly. And he's just
Poor
really
Ringo.
hating life. He just got back from Mexico City on little sleep, and now he's having to deal with this, having to rewrite this entire gamer because the Spurs can't hold off the Rockets from 25 points.
It did not go to a fifth straight overtime game, which would have been
close.
which would have been a record.
It was really close.
Ringo was sweating it, having to rewrite on the on deadline there. But when they were up 25 in the first half, Jeff, I want to ask you about this. I've never heard you talk about this before. When they were up 25 in the first half, what were your thoughts on whether or not that was a sure thing or not?
Line, please. Yeah, anyone who has seen the Spurs or the Rockets play this year knew that was not safe. The Rockets can score points, as we all know, can score points in a hurry. The Spurs can give up points in a hurry. Like I thought, if they had gotten off to a better start in the third quarter,
right,
and pushed that out a little bit more, then they would have been a little safer. But it got to 11 like fast, and that's when we knew it was trouble.
The end of the first half didn't go great either. I think it went from like 25 to 18, which doesn't seem like a big thing.
But
one of the guys who was not playing well right then, we're going to talk about later, was DeMar DeRozan. Kind of was part of a group of people who let that slip to 18 at halftime.
But I think it was 22 until the buzzer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right? So I think it was 19 at half.
19, okay.
It was 22 until at the buzzer,
right.
You're that close to being up 22 at half.
But going into halftime there where it's 19, if it was 19, that just seemed like, okay, well, that's the lead they're going to blow in the second half. That just seemed very obvious to me.
Or at least there's a very good possibility of it.
Yeah, you knew Bryn Forbes was going to go 6 for 6 from 3 in the second half as well.
You're right. I mean, Bryn Forbes in the first half had one of those And I'm repeating myself from screaming into the void, but it was a Klay Thompson-like quarter. The games when Klay Thompson just goes crazy and can't miss. He looked like that.
Do we have to do the other part too?
Yeah.
Where was he? Remember how Pop once called him Seth Curry,
Yes.
and he had one of those Seth Curry halves.
Yes.
And then the second half, he was more like, did I say Seth or Steph? Did I screw up my line?
Yeah, you
think
screwed
you
your
did.
line. You went
I
from
think you did.
It was supposed to be Steph, and then
You said he went from Steph to Seth, and then I said he went from Steph to 60-year-old Dell.
And if Ringo was here, he'd say, but I'm
Exactly. But, okay, so we'll get into the Brent Forbes thing because, as I mentioned, the void, Jeff was taking a respite from Twitter that night. He was not dealing with the shut-ins. I was dealing with the shut-ins. I made a observation about what I thought was a pretty significant Pop substitution change at the end, and yet all the shut-ins wanted to talk about was why was Brent Forbes on the court at the end of the game. Brent Forbes was on the court at the end of the game because he got the shot. He got two shots that you wanted to take, one of them that was halfway down and would have, forced overtime? Possibly won the game?
No, I think that was the corner three would have been a go-ahead shot.
Would have been a go-ahead shot.
And the other one would have forced overtime, yes.
So I understand, and we've been through this a lot in this secure location, top secret podcast headquarters, about how we're totally sympathetic to the argument that Lonnie Walker could play more, that Marco Bellinelli, friend of the podcast, should play less, that Brent Forbes is an imperfect player, can be a liability on defense. But in that situation there, like Brent Forbes,
You had your best shooter taking
you had
the two
your
shots.
best shooter taking two shots.
Open.
Wide open. One of them, it's not like he just flubbed them
Yeah.
like I flubbed this recording thing earlier. Like they were in rhythm. The shot goes halfway down, and you had mentioned earlier, I mean, sometimes it's a make or miss game. This was a make or miss loss for the Spurs.
yeah. Who was the alternative, Patty?
Right. I mean, I'm not sure who else you want. Patty, maybe I feel more comfortable taking that shot because he takes a bunch of them and has taken a bunch of them over the years. But I mean, we're splitting hairs here.
Mm-hmm.
So and then
I mean, Patty did make the game winner in the historic victory in Mexico.
this is true.
If you go back to the positive side of the week.
Right.
Instead
But
of
Patty
being
and
so
Brent
negative all
both
the
had
time.
the same kind of problems with their games. They're both great shooters who struggle on defense at times.
Right. Patty's been, based on what he's asked to do, Patty's been their best player this year, and I'm not sure there's a close
He's
second.
the best player at filling his role.
Yes.
Correct. He's had
Yes, absolutely.
the best season relative to role.
Some
Yeah, for
people
sure.
have pointed out that if you're looking for a second place on net, like Jakob Poeltl could be
yeah,
a guy.
Yeah.
Rudy Gay has kind of had a low-key fine year. Like he hasn't ever really taken games over, but I think that Patty's number one and Jakob's probably number two.
Yep.
In terms of just filling the role.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Third
Especially
would
being
probably be
consistent.
like Chimezi Metu because his role is to sit on the end of the bench.
See again, Jeff McDonald. Just his brand is positivity, and he's finding the silver linings in all of this.
He looks on the bright side of life.
Yeah.
Another thing,
Everyone who knows me knows that about me.
exactly. We are another thing that I want to just acknowledge and get out of the way before we have the DeMar DeRozan discussion is to kind of touch on the Lonnie Walker deal that people are still upset about. Why isn't Lonnie Walker playing more? Lonnie Walker could have played more in that game. It's a funny argument to have because Lonnie didn't make a shot in that game and got his 10 minutes and didn't do a whole lot with it. So on the one hand, yes, you understand why you want to play him more. On the other, Pop is kind of giving him opportunities and pieces. And yes, I totally understand why people think that Pop should just throw him out there for 25 minutes and let him sink or swim. But it's not like, other than the just superhuman effort he had against the Rockets in the game in San Antonio in that comeback, it's not like he's just seizing these moments and taking control. Again, I think he should play more than Marco Bellinelli. But a big problem that some fans had with that game, this last Rockets game in Houston, is why is Lonnie Walker playing 10 minutes equal to Marco Bellinelli's 10 minutes?
I would give Lonnie all of Marco's minutes at this point.
I
I'm not going to be irate if you don't, but I
Right.
would.
Right.
I would. Like, what do you have to lose? And there just seems to be more upside. Like, maybe he didn't make a shot in that Houston game, but there just seems like there's more of a chance that he's going to get to the rim and get you 4, 6, 8 points
I would
than it
agree.
is that Marco's going to all of a sudden start making shots.
I would agree.
But I'm not going to be. I mean, I don't.
But I don't think that like after this past Rockets game, the blown 25-point lead in Houston, there was a certain contingent that's like the Pop blew this game by playing Marco over Lonnie, and I don't think it's that significant. I think totally on their side, like Lonnie should play more. But Lonnie didn't look great in the 10 minutes that he played, and it's not like you would have just said that, like Lonnie Walker would have stopped the Rockets' comeback.
Yeah.
No, it's not that significant or that simple.
Right.
I will say there was a moment there where you're just treading water and trying just to score some buckets to keep pace, and Marco missed like 3 in a row.
But
it's just like, geez.
Again, those are shots.
You have one job.
Those are shots though that you expect. Like that's his job.
Right.
That's why he's on the floor and he missed them. So he blew it.
I'm not telling him not to take them. He hasn't made them all year.
You're right.
Like at some point, it's just
Marco's had one game where he looked good, and he's just not had a good year, and I think that's why people are so clamoring for anything else. Anything.
I feel like they even might have run a play for him during that stretch and got him just a wide open corner 3, or maybe it was a transition.
You really watched this game closely.
I think the shut-in.
Like, good. I mean,
the shut-ins might prefer a 60-year-old Della Curry to Marco Bell in LA at this point.
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen. And again, it's a weird argument to have with people because you're sort of on their side.
It's sort of like you're right, but could you calm down?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point that I'm trying to make. You're right, but calm down. And it's not like if this other thing happened, if Lonnie Walker got 8 more minutes per game, that all of a sudden, A, the Spurs are in the playoff race, or B, like Lonnie's becoming an all-star. I don't think it's that crazy.
Yeah, I do like him though.
I do. I do too.
I would like to see what he becomes.
I will also say that I can't remember if it was during this podcast or the podcast in the Void where we talked about the Derek White, DeJounte Murray backcourt and how that has the highest defensive potential of any Spurs backcourt. And both of those guys, I realized Harden's streaky, but both those guys made Harden work in that game.
Yeah,
and like
sure.
there was Harden got his in the end, and the Rockets won, and Harden wasn't going to miss shots all night, but he wanted no part of DeJounte Murray there in the first half.
When you're talking about closing with that lineup, do we trust DeJounte Murray offensively yet? I don't even mean making shots. I mean just making decisions.
Well, he's been very inconsistent this year, just an overall play.
Like that, he just makes me nervous on offense.
There's a question there about if those two guys are together, maybe should the quote unquote point guard in that situation be Derek?
And then you put a guy off the ball that can't shoot outside of 12 feet.
So that's an issue.
The problem.
Which is why you have to have Bryn in there, or you have to have Patty Mills in there.
This is why we haven't seen a lot of this.
Yes.
Which is a problem of, again, losing Davis.
Yeah. Well, I think more than that, it's just a problem of those two guys playing together. With any other 3 guys.
Yeah. You need more two-way guys.
Yes. Because if DeJounte is in the game and he's not handling the ball, then there is no reason to be guarding him, really.
Nope.
And if DeJounte is handling the ball, as Jeff just pointed out, sometimes he does.
Makes me nervous down the stretch.
Rookie-type stuff.
Makes me nervous down the stretch.
No.
But another person.
But it's not like everybody else is like the eye of the tiger.
Another person, and this is how we will segue.
It's a good segue.
Another person who makes you nervous or has made you nervous with the ball in his hands late in games is the veteran former All-Star DeMar DeRozan, who kind of has not been at his best in some of these close games. And like I wrote a column this week about whether it's important what Pop was trying to prove by sitting him for the final full 46 of this game, whether he was just trying to win the game, whether he was trying to send a message. One thing for sure, he's not. I had some people say, "Oh, he was tanking." He was not tanking.
No.
DeMar was off the court because he thought the other guys gave him a better chance to win, and because DeMar just hasn't. He's been productive. He's had his moments, but he's struggled some in these games, and so this is kind of the meat of what we wanted to talk about today. What does it mean that DeMar DeRozan was pulled with 4:46 left and did not come back into a game that went down to the wire? And is this something that kind of foreshadows anything?
I don't know. I want to say I don't think so. We'll see. I think what it means is what you said, that in that particular game at that particular moment, the way that game unfolded, that's the configuration Pop thought was going to win him the game. I don't know if it means that's going to, like, DeMar's never closing games again. That doesn't seem right.
It doesn't.
And like, I had people tweeting at me like, well, this obviously means they're going to have to trade DeRozan. No, like, you're jumping way ahead of the.
I don't think it means they have to trade DeRozan, but I think it further cements the idea that can or might be considered.
Well, I think there's a great chance he's traded before. I don't want to be aggregated, but I just personally, I think there's a pretty good chance they look at trading him before the trade deadline. But I don't think it's related to
if these
the fourth quarter against Houston.
If these combinations work out, I mean, it gives you more comfort in trading him that you still might be able to get that 8th spot, which the Spurs for some reason really cover, is making that playoff run, and still be able to trade DeRozan and get future pieces, which, you know, it has to be some kind of goal.
I mean, this is where I'll point out that Pop has closed games without Tim Duncan before.
Yep.
He's closed game without Tony Parker before. He's closed games without Manu Ginobili before.
Yes.
He has a history of, like, riding with guys,
right.
riding with young guys, just letting it play out. And it doesn't necessarily mean the next game it's going to be the same idea.
And I acknowledge this in what I wrote this week, that this is not the first time that Pop has sat a star at the end. Also, Pop would just, it's like nails on a chalkboard to him to have someone analyze these types of things. Like his response is, "You're putting way more thought into this than we did." You know,
so you're saying Pop doesn't listen to our podcast?
This wasn't a.
I don't think he knows what a podcast is.
I mean, Jeff just learned what a podcast was last week. So, and like, they're similarly familiar about technology. That's why they get along so well, Jeff and Pop.
Yeah.
But yes, I don't think that this particular game against Houston is just automatically means that DeMar's not part of the rotation anymore and they're moving on, what have you. What I was fascinated by, though, is that it does kind of reinforce the idea that those two guys, Murray and White, and I think at some point Lonnie Walker gets into that group, those are the guys who are going to be around the next time the Spurs have a chance to be a true contender.
Oh, that's absolutely correct.
And I'm not saying they are going to be a true contender, but if the next time they have a chance to be, those guys will be around, and I don't think DeMar DeRozan will be.
I would say the next team, the next Spurs team that has, like, let's say, home court in the first round of the playoffs will have neither LaMarcus Aldridge or DeMar DeRozan on it.
Yes, and that is it's a weird kind of needle to thread in terms of how we talk about DeMar and LaMarcus, because it's not like they've been terrible. Again, as we've said in this secure room many times, they've been their best players the past couple of years. And it's not like DeMar asked to come to this place and be the star.
Yeah.
And he never said, "I'm going to come here and carry you to the plate." Like, he's just kind of doing what he can. He's been a good teammate. They love him. Pop loves him. It's just a deal where they're in this awkward situation where their best player, maybe their best two players, are not going to be around whenever they're good again. I'd be shocked if they would be.
Yeah. But you also can't, at this point, you can't have those two guys and not play them.
Right. Which goes into another discussion we've had about how some people think that DeMar's best role on this team would be to come off the bench.
I agree with that. I just don't think you can make it happen.
It's just never going to happen. It's never going to happen because why? Not that DeMar's a bad guy or a selfish guy. He's just like every other player who's been in the league for how long has he been in the league? 10 years almost?
More than that.
And how many All-Star teams has he been on?
How many All-Star teams has he been on? Those guys just don't accept the move to the bench and say, yes, I'll do whatever I can for this team that is not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
No,
He would. I have a feeling that if the Spurs were leading the Western Conference, or had a legitimate chance to play for a title this year, and Pop went to him and said, "Hey, we think the best thing for the team is for you to come off the bench," I think he'd say, "Sure, sign me up." He wouldn't love it, but he'd
prime
great.
Prime Manu Ginobili didn't love it,
Right?
but that was pitched and sold to him as this is what we have to do to be a championship team.
Right.
You can't make that
No, but DeMar
argument to DeMar at all.
Especially okay. If you're, go ahead, Nick.
No, I was going to say DeMar on a contending team. DeMar would make a great Lou Williams.
Right.
Yeah, that's what he is.
Yes.
That's what he's, a bigger Lou Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, not to not to speak for Manu Ginobili, but if the Spurs were in 12th place, I think he would bristle a little bit more.
And especially if he was maybe not the end of his career, but
right.
When he was at
25, 20. Well, he came at 25.
If he was at DeMar's age, heading into a season where he had no ties to San Antonio, and he's heading into an offseason where he's looking to get his last contract.
Yeah.
Like you can say, oh, it's selfish of DeMar not to want to come off the bench, or that he had bad body language at the end of that Houston game, which is something that everybody noticed. Like, he's at the end of the bench and he's not excited to be on the end of the bench at the end of a game where the outcome is in doubt and he's not playing.
Neither was Tim.
Right.
When that would happen.
Right.
He's a lot of this is, I think,
DeMar's not a bad guy. DeMar's not a bad teammate. He's not a bad player. He just doesn't fit.
People don't like his game, and they want to assign all these other negative attributes.
Correct.
That more than anything drives me nuts.
DeMar is actually a really good guy. That's
correct.
Yeah,
correct. I don't think many people who are around dispute that.
I don't think many people who know what they're talking about dispute that.
The other issue with that, though, is if the Spurs want to trade him, and we're not, for all the aggregators, we're not saying that he's on the block or that the Spurs have even had any discussions with anybody about trading him. It's just natural that this idea would be out there, and that's something they would consider. Like, he probably needs to play so teams can see him play. Like, you don't want him pouting on the end of the bench.
Except not the final 4 minutes.
Right.
Right.
I think Pop was saving his trade value.
Could be.
And
Could be.
For all this trouble that we're saying that he doesn't fit with his team, he hasn't been playing very well, there are a lot of contending teams that would want DeMar DeRozan.
As like a third option, he's ideal.
Yeah, and it's just hard to put together a deal that would make that's the way.
The money's always a problem.
Money's a problem. What do the Spurs get back? Or are they just going to trade him for just to get him off the out of the way so the younger kids can play? I don't.
All these are
concerns,
issues that R.C. Buford and Brian Wright and Greg Popovich have to consider when they look at this. The other one is, as we brought up on the podcast before, some people say, well, just let him go in the offseason and then just use that money to sign someone else. It doesn't work that way because the Spurs are over the cap, and if his $27 million, if that goes, that means you might only be able to replace him with 12, 14 million worth of players.
You can get further under the cap, but for what?
Right.
If
next summer's a bad free agent.
If DeMar DeRozan were to become a free agent next summer, the best free agent the Spurs might be able to sign is DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah.
So it's better to trade.
It's an interesting point in this franchise's history for a lot of reasons, and we talked about last year, the first year with DeMar, first full year without Kawhi Leonard as being the transition year. Well, the transition's kind of extended here. And I think the transition lasts as long as Aldridge and DeRozan are here. I think they're the middle period between everything that came before them and then whatever they turn into after.
Right.
And they're I don't mean this in an insulting way, but DeMar and LaMarcus are placeholders to a degree.
Yep, not to a degree. That's what they are.
Yeah.
And I can see why some fans just want them out of the way as soon as possible and play the young kids, cash them in for assets.
Yeah.
And if you suck for a while, you suck for a while. I get that.
Yeah, but you almost have to have the placeholders because you don't want to do a disservice to Pop because you don't know how much longer he's going to be here. You want to make that playoff push. As long as you have the best coach in the NBA, you want to try to make the playoffs.
As we said last week, if the 7th and 8th seed would get out of reach, then it would make these decisions a lot easier.
Yeah, but everyone's playing like
trash. Crap. Yep.
Right. Do you think that LaMarcus has more value on the trade market than DeMar does?
I don't know. I don't know.
Possibly he has a little bit more control and he makes a little bit less money, so that makes it a little bit easier to trade. And I think his buckets are a little bit more efficient.
It would seem like if somebody just needs a post guy, that's a more obvious filler than, or a more obvious target than whatever someone would need for DeMar. There's a lot of wings and guards on teams out there. I could see somebody saying, "Hey, we need a big guy." But the downside of that is LaMarcus doesn't play the style that all the good teams play.
Neither one of them do. That's the problem.
Yeah.
No, because
our problem.
If people are looking to trade, if the thing that most people want to add to their team down the stretch is a 3-and-D guy.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be DeMar, and that's not going to be LaMarcus.
Yeah. Yeah. Where, like, how long does this kind of stasis, the right word for whatever the Spurs are in right now, how long does that last? Like, when do you want to make a decision as to what this season is?
I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Like I said earlier, if you were clearly out of the playoff race, it would be easy. But as long as you're there, I think they're going to keep pushing for it.
Yeah, you almost have to wait almost all the way to the trade deadline just to see where you're at. Just because unless these 7 Sacramento or the Suns or someone starts pulling away, you just keep,
I feel like
at it.
I feel like the deals aren't getting worse between now and February.
No,
You're right.
Like you can wait and see where you are in January and February and.
I think
a
it's
decision
almost
there.
better to wait to make a trade because teams will get more desperate as they're trying to make the playoffs.
It's kind of amazing that we have not spoken about one of the more popular highlights of the week since our last podcast, which was DeJounte Murray getting in the face of James Harden. What did you think of that little showdown?
Yeah, well, good. I kind of thought good for the kid.
Yeah.
Good for him. Like.
Good for the kid. It didn't look like James Harden is very, very used to it. He's like, what the heck is going on?
What I loved,
someone treating me like this.
My favorite part was James's personal bodyguard running out on the court to save his guy. That was kind of funny to me.
I think James Harden thought he deserved 10 free throws for that.
It pales in comparison to the NBA brawls and fights of yesteryear, not that long ago, but nowadays that was a pretty big deal. You had DeJounte taking the ball away from Harden, and this started in the preseason.
Yeah, that's right.
DeJounte kind of standing up to James Harden. Like, James Harden is, again, he won this game, and he's a totally justifiable MVP candidate.
Sure.
He's one of the best in the league. But he does not like DeJounte Murray to see him in front of him as a defender. And if you're looking for just things to get excited about in this season that hasn't had a lot of them for the Spurs, I mean, DeJounte kind of holding his own and wanting to go toe-to-toe with James Harden has got to be something.
Yeah, it is. It is. You wish you'd see more growth on the offensive end, as we mentioned earlier, but I think that's just part of the growing process for a point guard in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Not making comparisons, but when Tony Parker was starting out, he had some pretty horrific stretches of learning to play point guard.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes.
We will.
The upcoming schedule probably is what median is, like average. It's not like they're about to get fat. It's not like they're heading into the horrors of the rodeo trip.
Let's see. I guess
another
we're doing
visit
this
from Kawhi.
We should beat the Nets. I mean, well, I'm not going to say
I
should.
cannot
Good
believe
Lord.
you just did that.
I'm sorry. The
Nets are 15-12 and playing much better without Kyrie.
Nets are a team you should beat at home, right?
Team you
fair?
could beat at home.
Okay. Well, they own Kawhi, so that's,
They own Kawhi.
especially at the AT&T Center.
Warriors on New Year's Eve.
Kawhi has not won a game at the AT&T Center since he played for the Spurs. I just
true.
want to point that out.
It's true. So that's 2-0.
That's 2-0.
The Warriors are terrible. No way the Spurs lose to the Warriors.
There's no way they lost to the Cavs either.
They're at Memphis.
Memphis.
No way.
Oh, yeah, I skipped Memphis and Dallas.
yeah.
At Dallas, Lucas got a sprained ankle.
Yeah, just steal that one in Dallas.
Yeah. So that's 4-0. Then the Warriors at home. That's 5-0.
Sure.
And then there's like a
You're
Detroit.
by then, Detroit's in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
By then, you're probably in the playoff picture.
And then you start like trading for superstars. How do we get superstars in here to take them over the top?
Right. Then after that, Milwaukee comes in to showcase Giannis
Exactly.
for a trade.
Exactly.
Oh no, this is getting aggregated, isn't it?
Anyway,
This is some
idiots.
power of positivity going on right here.
we will the secure location. The top secret location is going to be closed off next week. You're going to have to make do with this just brilliant podcast that we just gave you for the next week or so. But we'll be back in year 2020, the 20s. We'll be back in the 20s.
We're waiting all the way to the 20s.
We're gonna be back in the roaring 20s, and
We're not even after Christmas.
that
I am not.
This may or may not be true. I think if it happens, it'll be like the 30th or 31st.
Yeah, the 30th. I am out of pocket until the 30th, and I am the guy who edits this video
And puts
this
the guitar music on the beginning and the end.
Yeah, so if it's too loud for everyone, just
might-
send me an email and yell at me. Get me on Twitter and yell at me. Just pretend I'm Jeff and yell at me.
We might bring some guitars in here to play
You
our
might
own
also
guitar.
have to take over the job of pushing record
That's true.
because the guy in
Well,
charge
that's Ringo's job, and Ringo will be back next time. Hope everybody
Don't blame it on
enjoys.
Ringo.
Hope everybody has a pleasant week of holiday frivolity, and we will catch you in the 1920 or in the 2020s, the Roaring 20s.
1920s.
And until then, take care of each other and keep it real.